Emotion-focused versus problem-focused coping is the psychological battleground where our resilience is won or lost. As my colleagues in the field and I have seen time and again, how we cope with stress can literally reshape our brains and redefine our relationships. Imagine you're facing a daunting deadline at work, and your mind starts racing with worst-case scenarios. In this situation, emotion-focused coping would involve acknowledging and addressing the emotional turmoil you're experiencing. Perhaps by taking a few deep breaths, going for a short walk, or talking to a friend about your anxiety. The goal here is to regulate your emotions and reduce distress, rather than directly tackling the problem at hand. On the other hand, problem-focused coping would involve directing your attention towards finding a solution to the deadline dilemma. This might entail breaking down the task into manageable chunks, creating a schedule, or seeking guidance from a colleague. The primary objective is to alter the stressful situation itself, rather than just managing your emotional response to it. One of the major psychological theories that underpins our understanding of emotion-focused versus problem-focused coping is the transactional model of stress and coping, developed by Richard Lazarus and Susan Folkman. According to this model, coping is a dynamic process that involves the constant appraisal and reappraisal of both the stressful situation and one's own emotional state. This theory highlights the importance of considering both the problem-focused and emotion-focused aspects of coping, as they can interact and influence each other in complex ways. The work of James Gross, a prominent researcher in the field of emotion regulation, has also significantly advanced our understanding of emotion-focused coping. Gross's process model of emotion regulation posits that emotions can be regulated at various points during the emotional response cycle, from initial appraisal to eventual expression. This framework has important implications for the development of therapeutic interventions aimed at enhancing emotional coping skills. Over time, our understanding of emotion-focused versus problem-focused coping has evolved to recognize that these two approaches are not mutually exclusive, but rather complementary. In fact, research has shown that individuals who are able to flexibly switch between emotion-focused and problem-focused coping strategies tend to exhibit better overall adaptation to stressful situations. This flexibility is often referred to as coping flexibility or regulatory flexibility. They found that breast cancer patients who were able to switch between emotion-focused and problem-focused coping strategies reported better psychological adjustment and quality of life compared to those who relied on only one type of coping. This study highlights the value of being able to adapt one's coping approach to the specific demands of a stressful situation. In terms of therapeutic approaches, dialectical behavior therapy, developed by Marsha Linehan, is an example of a treatment that explicitly targets emotion-focused coping skills. DBT emphasizes the development of emotional awareness, acceptance, and regulation as essential components of effective coping. By contrast, problem-focused therapies like cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, tend to focus more on identifying and challenging maladaptive thought patterns and behaviors that contribute to distress. To illustrate the practical application of emotion-focused versus problem-focused coping, consider the example of a college student struggling with exam anxiety. An emotion-focused approach might involve encouraging the student to engage in relaxation techniques, such as progressive muscle relaxation or mindfulness meditation, to reduce their pre-exam jitters. In contrast, a problem-focused approach might entail helping the student develop a study plan, practice effective time management, and seek support from a tutor or academic advisor to improve their exam performance. As we delve deeper into the realm of emotion-focused versus problem-focused coping, it's essential to explore the nuances of how these two approaches interact and influence each other in real-world scenarios. One fascinating area of research that sheds light on this dynamic is the concept of emotional granularity. Coined by psychologist Lisa Feldman Barrett, emotional granularity refers to the ability to recognize and distinguish between subtle variations in emotional experiences. This capacity has been shown to be a critical factor in effective emotion-focused coping. Individuals with higher emotional granularity tend to be better equipped to navigate complex emotional landscapes, as they can more accurately identify and address specific emotional needs. For instance, consider a person who is struggling to cope with the stress of a recent breakup. An individual with high emotional granularity might be able to recognize that their feelings of sadness are intertwined with underlying emotions of anger, hurt, and disappointment. By acknowledging and addressing these distinct emotional threads, they can develop a more targeted and effective coping strategy. In contrast, problem-focused coping often relies on the development of cognitive reappraisal strategies, which involve reinterpreting or reframing stressful situations to reduce their emotional impact. Research by psychologist James Gross has demonstrated that individuals who are skilled at cognitive reappraisal tend to exhibit better emotional regulation and reduced stress levels. However, this approach can sometimes be limited by its focus on altering cognitive appraisals rather than directly addressing the underlying emotional experiences. A significant controversy in the field of emotion, focused versus problem-focused coping, revolves around the question of whether one approach is inherently more effective or desirable than the other. Some researchers argue that emotion-focused coping is more adaptive in situations where the stressor is uncontrollable, as it allows individuals to focus on managing their emotional response rather than trying to change the situation. Others contend that problem-focused coping is more effective in situations where the stressor can be controlled or changed, as it enables individuals to take direct action to address the source of stress. To illustrate this debate, consider the example of a person struggling to cope with a chronic illness. An emotion-focused approach might involve helping the individual develop emotional acceptance and coping skills to manage their emotional response to the illness. In contrast, a problem-focused approach might entail working with the individual to identify and address specific aspects of their environment or behavior that could be contributing to their stress levels, such as developing a treatment plan or seeking social support. The therapeutic implications of emotion-focused versus problem-focused coping are also worth exploring. For instance, acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, is a type of therapy that explicitly targets emotion-focused coping skills by promoting emotional acceptance, values-based action, and cognitive diffusion. A CT has been shown to be effective in reducing stress, anxiety, and depression in a variety of populations. On the other hand, problem-focused therapies like solution-focused brief therapy, SFBT, tend to emphasize the development of concrete, solution-oriented coping strategies to address specific problems or stressors. In everyday life, understanding emotion-focused versus problem-focused coping can have a significant impact on our ability to manage stress and navigate challenging situations. By recognizing the interplay between these two approaches, individuals can develop a more nuanced and flexible coping repertoire that allows them to adapt to different situations and contexts. For example, a working parent might use emotion-focused coping strategies to manage their emotional response to a difficult day at work, while also employing problem-focused coping strategies to address specific challenges or stressors in their work environment. As we delve deeper into the realm of emotion-focused versus problem-focused coping, it's essential to explore the intricate dynamics between these two approaches in real-life scenarios. Consider the example of a college student struggling to balance academic pressures with personal relationships. An individual who employs emotion-focused coping might recognize that their feelings of anxiety and frustration are rooted in underlying emotions of fear and inadequacy. By acknowledging and addressing these emotional threads, they can develop a more targeted coping strategy, such as mindfulness practices or journaling, to manage their emotional response. In contrast, a problem-focused approach might lead the student to identify specific aspects of their environment or behavior that contribute to their stress levels, such as poor time management or unrealistic expectations. By addressing these factors through concrete actions, like creating a schedule or seeking support from friends and family, the student can reduce their stress levels and improve their overall well-being. The interplay between emotion-focused and problem-focused coping is also evident in the concept of emotional granularity, which refers to the ability to distinguish between subtle differences in emotional experiences. Research has shown that individuals with higher emotional granularity tend to be more effective in employing emotion-focused coping strategies, as they can more accurately identify and address specific emotional needs. For instance, a person who is struggling to cope with the loss of a loved one might experience a complex mix of emotions, including sadness, anger, guilt, and nostalgia. An individual with high emotional granularity can recognize these distinct emotional threads and develop a tailored coping strategy, such as writing a letter to the deceased or engaging in a creative activity to express their emotions. In addition to emotional granularity, another crucial aspect of emotion-focused coping is the concept of emotional acceptance. This involves acknowledging and accepting one's emotional experiences, rather than trying to suppress or avoid them. Emotional acceptance has been shown to be a critical factor in effective emotion-focused coping, as it allows individuals to develop a more compassionate and non-judgmental relationship with their emotions. Therapeutic approaches like acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, and dialectical behavior therapy, DBT, often emphasize the importance of emotional acceptance in promoting psychological flexibility and resilience. By cultivating emotional acceptance, individuals can develop a greater sense of self-awareness, which enables them to navigate complex emotional landscapes with more ease and effectiveness. The application of emotion-focused coping in everyday life is also evident in the context of social relationships. For example, a person who is struggling to cope with conflict in a romantic relationship might employ emotion-focused coping strategies, such as active listening or empathy, to manage their emotional response and improve communication with their partner. In contrast, a problem-focused approach might lead the individual to focus on finding solutions to the conflict, such as compromising on specific issues or seeking mediation. While both approaches have their merits, research suggests that emotion-focused coping can be particularly effective in improving relationship satisfaction and reducing conflict, as it addresses the underlying emotional needs and concerns of both partners. The interplay between emotion-focused and problem-focused coping is also relevant to the concept of self-regulation, which refers to the ability to manage one's emotions, thoughts, and behaviors in response to challenging situations. Self-regulation is a critical aspect of psychological resilience, as it enables individuals to adapt to changing circumstances and navigate complex emotional landscapes with greater ease. By understanding the dynamics between emotion-focused and problem-focused coping, individuals can develop a more nuanced and flexible approach to self-regulation, which incorporates both emotional awareness and problem-solving skills. This integrated approach can be particularly effective in promoting psychological well-being and resilience in the face of adversity. Furthermore, research has shown that cultural and societal factors can influence the way individuals employ emotion-focused and problem-focused coping strategies. For example, some cultures may place a greater emphasis on emotional expression and interpersonal relationships, while others may prioritize individualism and self-reliance. Understanding these cultural differences is essential in developing effective coping strategies that take into account the unique social and cultural context of each individual. By acknowledging and respecting these differences, mental health professionals can develop more tailored interventions that address the specific needs and concerns of diverse populations. In conclusion, our exploration of emotion-focused versus problem-focused coping has revealed the intricate dynamics between these two approaches, highlighting the importance of integrating both emotional awareness and problem-solving skills to navigate life's challenges. The key takeaway is that effective coping is not a one-size-fits-all approach, but rather a nuanced and flexible process that adapts to the unique needs and contexts of each individual. As we navigate the complexities of modern life, understanding the interplay between emotion-focused and problem-focused coping can be a powerful tool for promoting psychological resilience, improving relationships, and enhancing overall well-being. So, as you reflect on your own coping strategies, remember that balance is key. By acknowledging and accepting your emotions, while also addressing the problems that arise, you can cultivate a more harmonious and effective approach to coping with life's challenges. That's all for today's Psych with Sigmund. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and until next time, may your ego find balance between pleasure and reality.